Really what I want to talk about today is classification. And for those of you that know me, I have a tendency to get a little bit onto a soapbox, so bear with me for a couple of minutes while I do. Classification is really a simple job, and our human brain is really, really good at this type of work. And we classify things with grace and ease, and it's so easy for us that we don't even really notice when we do it. Like inane tasks like folding laundry or putting food back in the fridge are made really simple by our brains, and thousands of years of evolution were really, really good at classifying things. But imagine if the simple act of classifying clothing or deciding, which clothes go in which drawer was really hard. I took a college course on project management a number of years ago, and the instructor asked us to create a detailed process map for baking a cupcake. So the level of detail was irritatingly trivial. Like, do you really need to know, pick up flour as a step? Well, sidebar, the answer is no. If your audience knows something already, maybe they've made a cake before, and so you can simply say 1 cup of flour, and they'll intuitively know that this means measuring out 1 cup and pouring it into the mixing bowl. When it comes to classifying documents, like a call transcript, an email, a survey response, contracts, whatever it might be in the business world, the individual task is quite simple, again, for the human brain. We're really good at quickly identifying patterns, trends, lumping things together in relevant buckets. And it gets really hard, however, when the volume of items to classify increases significantly. So let's use email as an example. Take 20 emails. You can probably quickly sort them by sender. You can read the subject line, scan the body of the email, and maybe in a few minutes, you can bucket them into a couple of different categories. We probably do this already in our day-to-day work where you've got your inbox and you want to stick them into some folders. Right there, we've got some classifiers. This is a simple job. And with a mix of maybe our brain, or if it gets a little bit bigger, you might use an Excel spreadsheet or some like general tools that make this fairly simple. But let's take an example of 200 emails. It gets a little trickier, but it's still relatively easy for a person. So tools like an LLM might really help us here. Maybe we can ask the LLM to do summary work for us. We can copy the email into a prompt, get a summary, copy and paste that to an Excel file. But the LLM has no memory, won't be able to keep the labels or classification consistent. And if we wanted to do this continually, we wouldn't be able to see inside the LLM's process, so we couldn't be sure that the labels were necessarily trustworthy. For these reasons, a lot of people wind up either continuing to do it manually, or because we can hold labels in our memory and cross-reference against our labels and what we're reading versus coming up with a new label every time. They might hire an intern in this case, or find an entry-level employee to do this work. I've spoken with a number of investment firms, actually, who have a first-year analyst do exactly this kind of thing. They'll read, summarize, and classify an investment thesis of various partners and senior analysts. The challenges so far grow exponentially, though, when we start talking about much bigger data sets. So let's take a modest leap to 20,000 emails. This is roughly around when the manual effort begins to get so hard that it's not really worth it. At volumes in the hundreds of thousands, it becomes effectively impossible without some kind of tool. And this is when many organizations turn to their data science teams. So just take another pause and go back to my cupcake example. When someone has baked a cupcake before, it's relatively easy for them to get it right the next time with basic directions. But it's really hard if they literally have no clue what to do. LLMs are a little bit like this with classification problems. You bump into challenges with memory, volume of data, consistency of data formatting, and there isn't really a useful way of taking advantage of metadata fields when you use an LLM. Most people stick with the intern or use new ChatGPT plugins with Excel. They're pretty nifty little add-on, but if you're left with all the same problems everyone else already has with something like Excel, we've all been there when someone fat fingers a cell by accident and the entire worksheet is wrecked and it takes days or weeks to find the issue. Ugh. So I spoke to a customer service leader recently who is in a tough spot. Company earnings were down, and it was revealed that a specific segment of their customer base was really unhappy. They had a world-class program capturing metrics like NPS, CSAT, and so on, but metrics, for better or for worse, were for the most part lagging indicators. So why were these numbers going down? What was the root cause? They had to get to the bottom of it. They had several 100,000 customer service emails, survey responses, call transcripts, and they wanted to analyze all together what they were talking about, millions of documents. And it was all mostly natural language data. This is too much to summarize and label manually, and not particularly effective with consumer level LLMs either. They submitted a request to the data science team and the AI team, and they entered the queue. Weeks later, the project is accepted. Weeks after that, there's a basic labeling of calls, emails, surveys, but they're high-level topics. It's well known that most customer interactions have multiple topics. High-level labels and categories are useful, but they don't always lead to a root cause, nor will they help you solve the problem at hand. To uncover the root cause, you need to understand the subtopics that are nested within the overarching categories. For this customer service leader, the data science team took over a month on the project, with 5 people working on it. Plus, it was a one-time project. To run the analysis again might be a little faster, but there was a lot of work behind the scenes, and frankly, the data science team wasn't thrilled with it either. They're inundated with projects, and they wanted a faster way to do this kind of work. Enter HumanFirst. So what I'm going to show you here is a high-level architecture of our platform. You'll be able to see that on the top row, there's a variety of data sources, like a database like BigQuery, chatbot logs, surveys, emails, tickets, knowledge base. Any kind of source of natural language data can be useful in HumanFirst. We'll import that data source into the system. We'll embed that data so that it allows us to perform things like semantic search and adaptive clustering. And we'll allow you to run prompts and test your prompts at scale across a large data set, which allows you to curate that data and then export it into some kind of a report, an NLU model, or create custom applications. So hopefully this helps you get a sense of the type of problem that we're going to solve today. And I'm going to now jump into our product. So what you'll see here is the HumanFirst Studio. In the middle, what I've done is I've imported a number of emails in the public domain from Jeff Skilling's inbox, the CEO of Enron. When I click into it, you can see here there's a number of emails. We've got 4,100 emails in this example. And you can tell that there's a lot of information here. Even just me looking at this on my own might take a little bit of time to figure out what this email is about. And so if our first step, kind of what we would call use case 0 within HumanFirst, would be to categorize your data, right? What are we working with here? So to do that, I'm going to create a prompt, a summary prompt. Here's an email from Jeff Skilling's inbox. He's the CEO of Enron. Reference the conversation or the source data. Provide a summary of the main topic being discussed and give your answer in 1 sentence with a maximum of 10 words. Now, this prompt, I want to make sure that it works. And so what I might do is I might select a handful of these emails and I might move them to the stash. The stash is where we would test our prompts and make sure that they're operating the way we like. So I might click run for each item in the stash, and it'll just take a minute while the LLM uses the prompt to analyze every single one of the lines of text here in the original source conversation and produce a short summary with a maximum of 10 words. Here we can see Jeff Skilling forwarded letter about call tech communication services. Now, if I click into the details, I can validate whether or not this is actually true. So this is really important, especially when we're thinking about using LLMs at scale. We want to make sure that the prompt is accurate and that it's providing the kind of output that we want, and we can validate that it's true by looking at the original source. So I'm happy with this prompt, and what I want to do next is run a pipeline. Remember, I was working on 4,139 emails, not just the 4 that I put in the stash. So I'm going to go over to our Pipelines tab, where I can now run a summary pipeline, where I'll use the prompt that I had already done. I'd select the data set that I'm going to run that against, and I'm going to run the pipeline. This takes a couple of seconds, so the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to show you the output. So here, if I click into the summary pipeline, I can see now we've summarized all of the emails from Jeff Skilling's inbox. Great. So what we've done now is we've taken a large amount of natural language textual data. We've brought it into HumanFirst. We've embedded that data so that we can easily run analysis on it. And we've created a summary prompt and pipeline to summarize exactly what each one of these emails is about. Next, to be able to create a label is we need to use all of this generated data to run a taxonomy prompt. So let's go into the taxonomy prompt. We're going to propose a hierarchical taxonomy that can be used to group all of the different emails. Keep the taxonomy to a parent class and child class and use simple labels, maximum 3 words. Give your answer in this format with 1 class per line. Give your answer with no bullets or numbering. Again, I can run this on the stash. In this case, if I want to test the prompt, let me just remove these items because those are the emails. I'm going to want to select some of the summaries that I had done, and I will move them to the stash. And I can run this prompt on the generated data to see how this is performing. So this is a really important nuance that I'm going to raise to you, is that what I've done here is the merge query. So what this means is that it's taking the entire number of items that are in the stash, so all of the generated data, and it's running it against all of it condensed into one versus individually. And so what this means is that now I can look at all of those conversations, create a hierarchy of company business appointments, company business travel requests, and so on and so forth. The other thing that's really important about this is that we've now run a prompt against our generated data. So we're able, you can start seeing how it's really simple to layer and chain prompts together so that you can get to a level of analysis that you otherwise couldn't get to before. I'm happy with this prompt, so I'm going to run another pipeline because I want this taxonomy to be reflective of the entire data set, not just the 4 conversations or 4 emails that I put into the stash. So again, here we're at the taxonomy. I've run my taxonomy pipeline, and I can see that now here I have 21 different hierarchies that are relevant towards all of the emails that we've imported from Jess Skilling's inbox. So I'm going to select all of this hierarchy. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go back to my prompt where I'm going to assign labels. And here is just really simply, we're going to categorize the best fit into the following categories, and I'm going to paste all of those categories that we've identified in the taxonomy pipeline into the prompt. And if it doesn't fit well, answer with other, and keep it to just the categories listed. I'm not going to run a test on this one because I know that I've already run the taxonomy against the whole corpus of data, and so I'm confident on the output here. Finally, when I go and run the prompt on the label pipeline, what I'll see is here we have all of the different labels that have all the different emails that have now got a label assigned to it. Maybe I'll pick a better one: workshop, attendance. And here we can click into the details. We can see the different email, and now we have this. So what we've done is we've done 3 layers of prompts against our natural language data. But we have one more really important step that we want to do, is we want to now append this generated label to the original email. And this is critical because that will then be the basis for any kind of future analysis. Maybe you want to sort to specific labels and do analysis on subtopics and categories. We need to make sure that the original documentation has this as a metadata. So I'm going to go into actions. I'm going to reassign values. I'm going to move the data from the generated utterance all the way back to the original source. I'm going to copy the text, which is what was generated. I'm going to assign it as a metadata field, and I'm going to type in auto label, and we're going to then apply it on 4,000 items. And what I can do is I'll go back to my original data source where we have the conversations, and now I'm going to look at the metadata field, select auto label, and now I can see that all of these emails now are tied and tagged with the label that we have created. So this is really important because what it shows you is the ability to now perform the type of summary and classification that otherwise would have taken interns or individuals weeks, if not longer, to do on moderate-sized corpus of data. But you can run this type of work on millions of documents, hundreds of thousands of call transcripts, and so on and so forth. And this is a fundamental step if you want to perform any kind of further analysis. So what I've done is, I've exported this into a, basic report and into a basic tree map that you can see where we've taken the hierarchies and shown you how the different emails are classified. But you can do other kinds of reports as well on whatever kind of BI tool that you might use within your organization. Finally, you can also now take this model that we've created and turned it into an actual model within HumanFirst, where we have our labels and all the different subcategories that are, subcategories within. So events, community events, gatherings. So these are all of the different labels that we had created in the previous flow. and categorize based on the emails and the label that is beholden to them. And this can be used to create an NLU model or the basis of other types of AI projects or initiatives that you have running. So hopefully this has been really informative for you. Again, this is a quick demonstration of how HumanFirst can allow you to run a prompt at scale across a large corpus of data, chain prompts together, augment your data set, and use that to perform tasks that were otherwise really difficult. Looks like there's a question that has come in. Let me see here. Can this system be scaled to handle even larger data sets, say millions of documents, and what are the limitations? Absolutely. So there's not really any limitation on the volume of data that would be can be handled by the system. We have customers who are using the system to handle millions and millions and millions of survey responses, for example. And in terms of those types of documents, like surveys is a really interesting one because you'll have two types of questions in a survey. You'll have questions that are, yes or no, or they're quantitative, or they're easy to report on, or it's a drop down or something like this. And that you also have free form questions where just give us your generalized feedback on something. And typically that's where a lot of the gold lies. And it's really hard. If you're sending out 10 million surveys globally, and you're getting 10 million open-ended answers, you want to be able to understand what those are. So a tool like HumanFirst can allow you to really quickly and really easily summarize that information, categorize it, and start taking steps towards understanding what that corpus of data is telling you. There's another question that came through. So what's your process for getting to those prompts? Really good question. And there's this is one of the components of HumanFirst that I think is really unique, is that it allows you to experiment with what works in a prompt and what doesn't, right? I think most of us have probably played with ChatGPT in our life, and we've entered in some kind of answer. Well, what's really kind of eye-opening, at least for me, as somebody who used ChatGPT a lot and then just recently joined HumanFirst, when we go and we create a new prompt, for example, and you run it against a large number of different data sets, you actually realize how inconsistent the output can become. And this is a really important realization because I think for the most part, the average consumer just kind of assumes, okay, this is the answer when you get a one-off. But when you have even just 5, even if you just run it against a stash of 4 examples, you find that, hey, maybe actually I'm not getting the right kind of output from this prompt. And so you can start iterating on your prompt and giving it more and more clear instructions. This is partly why I talked at the beginning about this cupcake example, right? If somebody doesn't know how to make a cupcake, you might need to get as granular as pick up the flour, pour it in the bowl, grab a spoon, mix the bowl together. And LLMs are a little bit like this. And so there's this process of iterating and being able to check your work and figuring out what functions and what doesn't. Hopefully that gives you a really good answer. If not, happy to discuss that further. Another question came in: how might a business analyst who'd interact with HumanFirst platform to refine the classifications? For instance, how would they correct or adjust labels if the auto labeling process produces inaccurate results? Really, really great question. So there's a few different ways that you can approach this. What I had shown you previously was kind of this auto label format where you're able to get to your data set with the auto label. There's a different approach that you can also take within HumanFirst, which is what we'd kind of call the divide and conquer, where you can use some of our functionality around clustering and semantic search to identify different groups in a more manual basis. So if there's specific categories that you think are not working or that aren't represented in the auto label, you can absolutely take a slightly more manual approach, but it leverages some really powerful functionality that is probably more common in the data science world of clustering and semantic search to identify some of those opportunities for different labels and clusters. Another question, how easy is it to import different types of data? It's fairly straightforward. There's a couple of simple data importers. If you've got some unlabeled data, you can add data from, we've got some public data sets that you can play with. If you've got your own unstructured data, we support JSON, CSV, text, or we can also build a specific integration to a system that you might have in place. We've worked with customers who are, leveraging tools like Make or Airtable or other systems, or BigQuery is another that I mentioned, where you have a connector and you can automatically ingest that data. So we support a variety of different types of import types. There's another question. So how are sales calls analyzed to provide the classification or labels for those calls? Additionally, are there any limitations or challenges associated with this process that we should be aware of? Really good question. So as the head of sales, I've actually played a lot with this around analyzing sales calls. And I would show it to you in this demo, but there's some proprietary information, so I'd probably get in trouble if I shared it. But happy to jump on an actual call and walk through this. I built a handful of prompts that will pull out specific components of our sales process when analyzing calls. Like, for example, a really basic thing like next steps. Did we ask the customer before we hung up, to schedule next steps? Were we prescriptive about those next steps and what we should do to, progress the partnership forward? And so you can have a variety of these prompts that you can then run against your call transcripts, and really uncover where or when it didn't work. There's a lot of tools like Gong or Chorus or what have you that give you some of these generic insights. But for me, there's specific things that I would want to look for. And so even when using those tools, I would still find myself listening to the whole call or trying to find the areas in the call that were most relevant to me. And so with HumanFirst, I've actually found that now that I've got this prompt, here, for example, we got the summary prompt. When I bring new data into the system, I can just run the summary prompt again. I don't have to rewrite it. I've got this saved. So you start building a library of prompts that you can then use as your data set changes and improves. So there's one more question, and it says, so you can use the categories to organize new emails, documents, et cetera, as they came in. Yeah, exactly. So as I kind of mentioned, you've got your prompt saved. As you bring new data in, you can run this process and it can recategorize all of it. And so what you can do is this turns into a repeatable workflow that you can apply across your business. And maybe one final thought I'll leave everybody with before closing up is HumanFirst really allows you to build these kinds of workflows with any type of natural language data. And what I mean by this is if you can think through an output that you want to get to, and you build the prompts and you tune them to your liking, you can now continuously run and update that data, run those prompts, and get that output. And this is really powerful when you're a sales leader wanting to analyze calls, when you're a customer service leader wanting to understand customer behavior or sentiment, when you're a contracts manager and you're wanting to understand where contracts may or may not be out of compliance and so forth. So there's a lot of use cases where this type of workflow can be applicable, and I'd really encourage you all to get creative in where you're thinking how you can apply prompts to data. And this is really at the heart of what we're trying to do here at HumanFirst is, we call it PXD, it's prompt meets data. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time. Thanks so much for the questions and the engagement. And I think we'll be following up with some more webinars over the course of the next several months.